13 farmers sustainable platform for trading. The states are subject to legal pressure to inhibit. The flexibility allows the interstate quantities relative to water market. The markets are key. Out of the 14 markets, there are powerful institutional allocation value through exchange information works to adapt to water rates and set by official allocation trends really creates center conservation units to sort of correct the ag and other sports price to increase efficiency.
Mark the second card on solvency at incentives to increase efficiency. I think it's the fifth paragraph.
In which paragraph?
Fifth. It's efficiency.
Yeah. Good?
Yeah.
Okay. So how does the market work? It just, if I have water, I can sell the rights to that water to someone else?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, forgive me if this exposes my ignorance, but how do you move the water from one person to another?
I mean, so like so you're talking about the direct transportation of water. Yeah, so those mechanisms exist in the status quo. Like water is being moved constantly. I live in California. We get most of our water from the Colorado River, just moved through aqueducts. I mean, so with these markets do exist now. You can trade water now. Like the physical trading of water can occur. The question is just of regulation. Okay, so we would allow for that to happen between states.
So like the water that's going through like whatever pipe bend your water in California, is it like, if that's already in use, how do I put my water through it to give it to Joe who wants to buy my water?
What do you mean? What's the question asking? Like you're talking about in a pipe, like you already used the water. Like what does that mean?
It doesn't. I guess.
Like I mean, at worst case scenario, you can just like get trucks fill up with water and just like bring it over. But like all of our evidence is in the context that this thing can happen.
Okay, sure. I want to talk about the warming internally. You read a card that's just like water use and climate change are intertwined, and like one line that says the word carbon farming. Where do you think this is reverse causal evidence that's like water markets would solve climate change?
It says that water trading is what spurs that. So
okay, what evidence says that's going to solve climate change?
I mean, the log evidence says. I mean, we think carbon farming is an integral part of that, i.e., things like carbon capture systems are going to be necessary.
Does the log say it's like reverse causal?
I mean,
the last line of the card says it's key to like adapt to increasing temperatures. I think that is like the reverse causal thing.
Okay, so it doesn't stop warming. It just
well, I mean, carbon capture would mitigate the level.
Emissions get reduced, but water gets more expensive the more we emit. So
that would occur in the long run.
Okay,
so
none of that really seems reverse causal or warranted, but that's fine. I want to talk about the semiconductors internally. The scenario is about relative semiconductor production, right? Like we need to outdo China.
You could say that's probably true.
Okay, the Multani evidence, like you highlighted the part about the US, but then this middle part is like about China also having water shortage. Why does that mean they're going to?
I think the middle part's about South Korea, correct?
No, it says let's quickly discuss China, top consumer of water for fabrication. What ev says that like US specifically is going to?
I mean, this evidence is specific to the majority of it is talking about.
Well, right, you cut the part that's about the US, but I guess what evidence says that we are falling? Like, where in this card can you just read a line that's like we are falling behind China because of this?
Well, I'm actually reading the part about China and it doesn't say that they have like a shortage.
Okay, where do you think the part in the US says we have a shortage?
I mean,
just like the line.
I mean, the whole thing. Can
I just get one line?
Yeah, this is PhD student at Stanford. They're writing about.
No, my question is just one line in the card. The whole thing is then like any line.
Well, I mean, if you open up the file, I'm pretty sure.
I'm looking at the card.
Yeah, I mean the part of the card that's.
To scale the production of water intensive.
I mean, it says quote. I mean, you're right that we didn't highlight the line, but it says United States fab water use. So it is about the United States, but it's not I mean, it's just it's assumed.
Sounds good.
It's 7 then 1, 2, or 6 off.
6, sorry.
Not too many.
Yeah, I was expecting like 8 for people.
Sorry. Thank you. Have people gotten that?
Yeah, I got a call.
Okay. Peninsula, awesome. U.S.-Mexico water cooperation high now in the overall relationship, but it's fragile. Next 21. U.S. and Mexico rely on each other. Cousins farmers where having enough water states high need for cooperation, collaboration, which one of them are the anti and the future. The co-op requires strong governmental rates and plans market reform, both undermines the legal basis for cooperation and galvanizes resistance from Mexicans who hate water market force routine. Fed must obey the mandate legal system forms a solid decision that limits stability to water government shaped by individual group water rights itself in the interstate context from this is treaty Mexico decision among the populating greater couple water must be organized by national Mexico U.S. Mexico U.S. water treaties overarching and managing the major waterland river that defines really those water rights and water limit could be remembered for the 1944 treaty will allocate water for use including groundwater for relationship with the Northern Great Chinese influence Ortiz. 21 China U.S. logged into the after U.S. and Mexico in official relationship with water has maintained a special relationship like Korea and China and Chinese influence and give it to U.S. and Mexico develop a partnership with them as a result of intense exchange by bringing new tensions, draws in Russia and Chinese and exacerbates cartel violence. LS 16 there was no agreement with U.S. as border defender for 620 including British were done to change this spread good reunions secret intentions away from the foreign engagement cartel zone cartels in Mexico during long corrupt institutions that money governments examining from China and Russia and the economy without playing militaries in Latin America to allow military operation but the homeland forcing back in months regional. That's a likely great power warrior Sean 20. China has an interest in causing problems with the U.S. and the West. China will undermine head to the Americas. China's goal will be to stop head in Asia, water, and the Western Hemisphere. China wants the U.S. attention to America can intervene with Mexico and competition calling in war. Next off, Texas federal government should substantially expand international food aid and release double investments in agricultural and food research over the next 10 years. Establish a program to cover 1.8% of the surface of the Earth's oceans and a long layer of 0.1 that UFA or delayed export bearing a conventional stabilization system that is inactive in salt water substantially increase funding for research and development studying semiconductor technology and encourage allies to seize purchasing semiconductor manufacturing in China substantially increase study support for government to improve the plan cooperate on development water reuse and desalination technology and substantially increase precious mineral mediation between India, Pakistan, and India and China, including negotiating a new multiple line that communicates through text or receive only modes. Next off water record letter. Let the jag uppers and cut us small forms of periods. Level 22. The deep into our water record letter from to self-license out of a pretty big situation for operators want to cover a big ag move. All forms of digital investors low to less control industrial ag collapses indefinitely because of time efficiency transition to another sustainable farming now is key to some long list of existence threats and global food crises turns case on 20 catastrophe and catastrophic decline in plummeted rights and farming monoculture and fertilizer pollution and outage solar and also little influence throughout generation dangerous industrial agriculture and something in efficient escalating by options of global foods and God be the work within the current survival system or like more legally or in command of global food crisis and the industrial system next fall protection required regulation the avenue of competition in the water circle 10 protecting for regulation may as a given and other combination of the nerve and maybe more or less then it be a discrete resource regulation means government imposition of rules that levy penalties against private sector OC2 regulation about the business and live penalties motivated private sector regulation instead such developed organizations as the IMF they use the market mechanism limits and guarding the expert settlement expansive development enhancement and market mechanisms to ask those no fundings in competition to industry DEAs and accepted chemicals next off coming on energy production increasing job growth so upward strong wages growing and Russia's no big deal and then they retreat. U.S. heat should be rizzling into Ukraine with direct linkages. U.S. is a major energy producer, boost allocating job military exports receive a boost demand out of implying imbalance problem companies to raise trade sharply economy pushing solid growth unemployment down from policy allow for inflation return to market strong job for key things taking more markets cause price bubbles that cascade across the industry destroying agriculture and turning the economy decline 20 trading water means it becomes a bit of market and production price bubbles of the water market and peak price of foreign peaceful living and substantial companies and firms financial liquidity has the real economy fuel into building another commodity price like caution for use of markets new price bubble causes global nuclear war extinction syndrome 19 the growing concerns of dollars going to up and the current political landscape economic crisis is going to draw more into the world with more monitoring and wedges in the address economic weakness I like asset great purpose economic crisis is likely going to economic distress worsen and if you long around another one of economic stress likely from conflict war next off. I'm going to one. National water markets make zero sense. How do you move water demand to team, creating new markets in ways lower companies disposed from water and plant season away from the intense funds for water, the industry water is going to move. Water has to pass the right on this desert. Water is really heavy, except you can spend anywhere, even on small scale problems of fiscal food security zone doesn't work. The 16 needs to not link food security, not links the direct countries facing first shot without complex simplicities associated with the home country strong experience health the warning. Internal is just laughable, says it says just as interjected once, but never. So the average observations or solves in any way. Climate does not have the inside of you. That's COVID-19. Highlight the human civilization given an understanding of the instructions of the power and drastically on the thing was scenario of dialogue time of eliminated winter knowledge of all intelligent life including human civilization while it is false misrepresented of the science of couple honestly process takes a long time essentially personal speculation that can be drawn from this assessment. Multani as about China productions production being low there as such in the state China is fine that the US is not slow. So also be connected to QA and coding prices to depend on how time manufacturers following sync into US current supply of equipment Africa and God we gave it from loving high-end food trips for times high-tech sector truck state of situation where the contract and environmental domestic shift it will take decades for some break in and free entry but like company time vulnerability key relies on keeping us from institutions to have how you have to establish and being protected on the domestic supply market is again not just for and level 17 was strong with Israel energy not panicky for the semiconductor supply chain economy sure the domestic manufacturing need rather than any other means the US is trying to ensure even I was making for any part of losing up as you know it we have periods of legal cycle to group US budgets are going to create copies always obtain and most believe plans on words after most states know how to succeed in countries in the last powerful numbers and trade government is being lost in the news which has level of as an element just the friends that is more than the procedures of between the positive the kind of favor or something like that and which is really US not for new keys and your work is not getting stronger obviously the ability and new piece of new pieces it don't matter whether you have to do it done it is or what calls it Trump follows it you know what sharp water producible the real one cycle this was 19 staff for consider without any methodology or to do water renewable definitely after whatever we I need to produce more programs and is agriculture globally as I've done upon use to come for a decade where you increase more countries bring the money from one of the other scale of the more gas and known to period of war on ADPT and 19 India next time is going to be very change very loaded with the government and we're checking balances you do not and you call that few no one and you will initiate for private responsible power and so considerable strain market after considerable strain and no China war CSS I on much Roman 18 the China government and there's a very out of this like this I don't think there's any real danger of nuclear out of China's only China so corrupt and increased water usage. And 19, among fish I can't agree with that, but I am going to take up fairly water trading work is implied from claiming see the market traders, others what have broken regulation to more not even encourage left and hoarding, market card after hoarding and sorry.
Oh, where's hoarding?
It's right before the graph.
Oh,
Yeah, it's treating water as a commodity encouraged that.
yeah.
Mark the card after the graph.
Okay.
I'm going to address that.
Okay. Let's start with topicality. The OECD evidence of violation. It like gives examples of regulatory instruments and says prices are one of them. So why does the plan not meet your interest?
Right. We think that the app is distinct because it requires regulation of certain things. We think that the app allows for like the app's allowing of water trading is not in itself a regulation, but more a shift towards increasing harm towards water resources.
Okay, but like, so this is like an extra tier or anything?
No, it's just that you are not topical. The OECD card talks
Will
about
we increase
I think the most
prices?
important thing.
Will we impose a price?
Okay, I think that the OECD, I have a different reading of the OECD card. We think that it says that the government must impose penalties on companies. Those things could look like prices, but you don't do that. You just streamline the process for trading water. Just because you have something to do with prices does not mean you are in regulation, and it doesn't mean that you use prices in the way that the OECD evidence is indicating.
The advantage counter plan, can you kick planks?
No.
You can't kick planks.
Not hit points.
And then what are the net benefits? Are you just gonna claim all the dissents?
I think so.
You don't need policies.
Yeah, they skipped the last one.
Correct, yeah.
So you got that was yes, both dissents.
All three.
Oh,
Oh, actually not ag, but other two.
The
How's about the bubbles this time?
Say it again.
How is it avoid the bubble system?
How is, like, what is the link to bubble system?
How does the counterpoint avoid it?
Oh, because we don't establish water markets, which is what the climate evidence is about.
Let's talk about the first disadvantage. Your piece of link evidence is talking about minutes to the 1944 water treaty with Mexico.
Yeah.
How does that, like, what's the link? What's the link for the app specifically?
Yeah, the Walsh card indicates that the treaty with Mexico, well, it's up for review in 2023, and it's sort of the linchpin of our broader, like, cooperation.
So the disad starts in 2023.
Sure, although, well, that's one argument for the link story, but generally, there are sort of two links that I'll articulate. First is that people in Mexico hate it. The Walsh card indicates that, like, farmers, have,
Why they can't trade? Like, I mean, they're not part of it, so why would they hate it?
we think right now they're cooperating broadly with the US, and the water treaty that they have with the US is sort of founded on the idea that there is public sector control over water markets and over water
Where does that
rights.
say that in the evidence?
Yeah, it talks about how water management must be organized binationally, and later on in that same paragraph, it talks about how it's founded on responsibilities and
Okay, why does that, what does that have to do with, like, why would they suddenly go to China? Like, okay, that's fine.
Chinese.
The one I see. Wow. That's this one is it? This specific idea has to be here. Just like he needs it.
Do you mind if I find you the question?
Yeah, they have this card, but it's also. Yeah, then they come back up. Looks like they got just
Okay,
820. I can write it down.
yeah, two things that.
You can, unless you already sent, you could wait because it's in the restroom. I won't let you
Oh,
write, but.
yeah, I'm just leaving it.
Anybody here ever been to Singapore?
No, sir.
Yeah, I don't know, for some reason I wanna go there.
They're the best airport in the world.
Yeah, that was actually what got me started, and then I saw that like one of the booths in like one of their nighttime food markets got a Michelin star. And it's like $5 for dinner.
Oh, yeah, no, I think I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
It's like roasted duck for like $5. It's really good.
yeah, and I was like, good airport, place I haven't been, you know? Supposedly like very cool, like city-state kind of thing going. Maybe I'll go check it out sometime.
Medical tour, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's attached to the email. Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You're good.
As you should.
It's set now. Oh, that's awesome. There's like,
Plus it'd be a chance to see the Straits of Malacca.
there's random prep stuff at the bottom.
Full in the Jack would come. Makes sense. At least it's not 30.
Oh, can I just?
Much like a
Just kidding.
If you care about being on screen, you might want to move that. I don't care.
Oh, yeah, maybe, I don't know.
Just like.
Well, that's not the camera. Is the
Oh,
camera
yeah,
just the
you can just
computer?
point it, yeah.
Okay.
Because you can just buy cameras, looks like.
Okay, sure. The order is the shortages advantage, the modeling advantage,
That's 1, 2, right?
T regulation, the advantage pattern plan, the ag design, the bubbles design, and then the Mexico design. Good. Okay. Drop the hedge, decline concentration, multiple causes the rotation material pearl, if never out to that says brands. Yes, the plant solids water raising the way that water is distributed on a large scale, i.e. states giving water to cities or we have distribution between states through prior appropriation. These fail now because the federal government isn't facilitating them. Their causes for descriptive that's the cold evidence food insecurity concentration instability multiple state rich prior causes to inlet channels and allies and adversary triggers mass migration that execute power war. That's the bridges evidence. Their evidence is not responsible about intrastate wars, not interstate wars. Yes, they do all warming carbon farming. And I read the line, you want to see causes like warming causes usually severe weather conditions, ecosystem loss that are caused possibilities and air system overwhelm. Their defense, which is evidence will taught it is about yes, it's comparative, and I'll read a card on the counter with the next evidence in the app war and the app is key to semiconductors, but thanks for reading adjusted to the camera floor. It's be yellow when I see young. We want to see young in 21. How the US government will address tech competition with China for regime inflation for not only regimes to the global tax difference, about the future quantity assigned integration, yes, domestic reaction, the key to semiconductors about the global perception, yes, military capability, which obviously we can't get from other countries. Somalia, and I drop the water shortages, conflict, ancient items, start my timer, do you know how much time I have?
7 minutes flat.
International tensions, cyber driven by diversity loss and ecosystem loss of extra resistance and yes, water shortages that people sevens is our argument. Water is renewable, but demand and the supplier mismatch which causes over depletion and needs that is not allocated correctly. Yes, modeling one water leadership. America has unrivaled prestige in global water governance. Reforms of water allocation will be adopted abroad as single key to yes, institutional model. Global forms and adoption of water markets are only successful as the price of blueprint implementation that's further to be virtual water agitation and virtual water sufficient to provide that's the Dolan evidence in impact only public community supporting superiority causes useful about sure they mark the cardiology water versions as a miscalculation, which is a clear evidence in Indochina conflict escalates from Puja and the critical strategic feature both countries that causes flashy as India's economy to China integrated the region of because the clear evidence yes right to solve not just anti-shut and also cap and trade, which ensure the trading occurs. Public county we need the office regulation and spirit of relevant parts of the bear evidence we need planets adopting counter protection means regulation of water trading EK innovate trading with confidence approaches to protection example is cap and trade and trading programs between water firms counter protection requires changes allocation of water rights as well not the other into protection developers conservation the highest economic social benefits of use of radiation, object on maximum consumption use allocation of water resource the full recognition that make the protection not cost to use activation over limiting to be outside of regulations to create stability only we use resolution of warning their evidence in this measure of water law so flows to the effects he asks no other option use water rights system there's this worse because you could barely any activity that affects water counter only have to juggle functional limits because if you limit its only answer feasibility key what doesn't counter and their interest is over which creates unlimited illegally off me through yellow when it's either content or prevent either from correcting the resource and their access we need which one is the OECD issue president Russia of dealing with one of those frequently used advantage travel and permutation to build column plumbing after the PhD to the counter plumbing to do combinations of plants to get new money after the block links which is a net benefit it still increases the price of water advantage comes or permutation to both shields because it increases the amount of water we have through desalination advantage comes of lineage don't let it go to question till these intrinsicness our interpretation of our specific mechanism counter plants for issue for all the plants is none of them solve our root cause arguments about markets and water shortages being key hold the line because the one to see has its red solvency advocates for class enjoy them which means to get new money hours now the ag plant get fails exporting more food is impossible because you cannot produce more food if you don't have water which is the worker evidence of balls plant fails they dissolve Morgan in a level bowl onto dissolve it these can't triple the surface and more pressure increase given the young Laplace equation large pressure almost the ATM bubble resolve in about 10 seconds and increasing manufacturing for semiconductors is irrelevant our evidence is comparative so the absence of sustainable supply of water production becomes impossible because the key to every stage of the manufacturing process that's simultaneous evidence that exporting does not matter because China is not a net exporter now it's a question of US manufacturing if the US manufacturing declines and the cost hedge declines decel fails promise TNT cell will not be built to the form of the Koski cell is played by environmental problems throughout the heat of the water, but the cartridge deal GHG is sucking seawater until the organisms in the hot life like when they will pick up to doesn't solve against can't prevent columns between them from starting through water diversion through hot lines failed as torture. In 21, hot lines established with weight treatment and interest in using those parameters and 30 different China as yes, China resistant after crisis manager the ready of the military activities parts in the United States to reassure to American and China have relation of Russia topics so many will have failed it. NATO accidentally crumbled the embassy. Barack Obama she is signed on memorandum but it has not been used to China related to American military exercises content body discouraged from media press office control to bad positions see the time strategy to unclear on content salty and kick the camera if you don't make an army sources grow the act is that salty impact but the difference never as we have one is like using water sources make agriculture growth impossible because they need water to grow crops due to innovation forced to cause internalization via regulation cause relevance sustainable agricultural practices that improve production that's the Booker evidence and ag is down now. I don't know how big the author in 20 challenge includes supply chain stability and instability that pandemic extreme stress upon the growers from class ahead take us years to employment lumber sustainability affecting agriculture demand. The total asset of working capital has fallen no link while there are uncertainty markets as regulation if it'll platform is the same physical evidence modernization solid scope mineral protein farmers that it's an opportunity market to provide farmer has option to decline the offer by so like it's a water develop for profit use of crazy to manufacturing new system entailed use as much as less water and the Coachella value income and system body use of stronger water transfers involving water from active reduction not need to come at the farm output or rural communities. It is accomplished by modernizing using offshore modernization and future water conservation line that means the greater less water. The bubbles is unrelated to marks in the rule which sums every set of prices pound or when the comments will get in 20 the value is risen as well find water value has risen the price never equals the value. This discrepancy is due to the absence of markets and formal markets often in India so politics and water stress and formal markets in the United States is going to be established how will be critical regulation has been keeping sure the market fluctuation that effective TP varies in the United States the price is spiked and dropped in high availability markets when it needs to be adequately valuing water. The kind of regulation in the United States in order to develop market formation and selling in other countries due to lack of regulation and government trade set us at the derivative streams have trade ensure sustainability that properly allocates of value that creates like that would use water like a lump of coal that plant salt high prices the sauna. 21 market on water by the no show requirements and against water rate shocks to boost the cost of water and fears and warranty the management financial risk water trading meet developing advanced rates effectively how much water is allocated trading has the scarcity reduce the cost of water by 60% protecting thousands of families ensuring that water available for future generations and the kind evidence is about Australia and says that there's no bubbles. One is decline in 20 the paper focus on the Australian water market recent peaks and prices however should be original bubble phenomenon the majority of water cycle did not show any pattern of price explosions in hydro low factors of global economies. Explain the emergence of price bubbles made the economy resilient and water underpins the economy which means without the counterplan they can't solve and no economic COVID proves. Mexico. One is delivery no reason water key to broader relations. 2, US-Mexico relations are dead, the drug war, etc. 3, that this is not external, the impact is asset-wide, which hedges for Europe. 4, no link their is not about the plan. It's about other water policies. 5, Mexico doesn't like the plan, then they won't model it. And there's no link to the DISAT 5, the DISAT starts at 2023, which means out of automatically away. 6, China and Mexico are besties now. Bravo and 20, thank you, China followed. China's delivering medical supplies to Russia. Mexico's coronavirus separate Chinese medical diplomacy of Department of Transition and the FCC and Pacific alliances and NATO to put it. Members of rising China branches of Russia, the alliances of aggression, Mexico's ongoing crisis will exacerbate friction points that China's sustainable investment, Beijing has extended the to Latin America. The US and Mexico should extend security law enforcement coordination as it would include reinforcing Venezuela and Nicaragua, integrating with Argentina and Chile, applying pressure to target officials. You have more cards for Mexico. Okay, I'll read this card for now. Bubbles are good for the economy. Carlson sells back in 21 on the bubbles. Bubble, positive legacy, economy, capacity, and a larger bubble, the lasting high capital tax, railroad, accelerate bubbles, the commodity bubble, legitimize the economy, productivity, Amazon clean energy, tax bubble, accelerate innovation, deployment, and implementation, and technology, consider gravitation attack, missing has today ability to track how makes it abstraction, abstracts the transformational measure, reshaping the industry that macroeconomic, set up by macroeconomic bubbles, finance empowers confidence and opportunity, diversity, and attracts entrepreneurs to the downset of bubbles orchestrated outside of bubbles as water because the process water not concentrated bubble green tech transfer the macro economy into speed. And no great powers don't get John and shipment and 9 outside powers do not pose a geopolitical challenge to the insecurity and control of the globalization in countries in Latin America and forceful to leave a greater goal for influence.
That's on Mexico?
You have cross section?
Yeah.
Can I answer real quick? Yeah. What were the standards of conduct?
Discourages us from reading our best offense and encourages bad one and sees. Interprets dispose can kick the counter plan if we don't make an argument it's worse than score and prevent unsolved residual offense.
That one, see. What was the very first thing you said?
Discourages straight turns and reading offense against counter.
And the other thing, I just want to on bubbles. there was the econ resilient and no impact COVID, were those both in low study curve?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, on the Mexico dissad, everything before our evidence isn't about the plan, could you just restate those arguments?
Sure. First, no spillover, no reason water is key to cooperation over things like military exercises. Second, U.S.-Mexico relations are dead now because of the drug war, etc. The dissad's not external. The impact is SOIs, which hedge is a prerequisite too, because if the U.S. loses its military, you can't deter Russia and China. No link. Your evidence not about that's the last thing you told me to say. So.
Wait, okay, could you repeat the word for dissad's not external?
Yeah, so the 1AC evidence says that the military collapses absent PF. We can't deter Russia and China if we don't have a military.
Okay, makes sense. Let's talk about this Gabo 20 card you read. It just talks about how China helped out Mexico like during COVID. Our scenario is about US Mexico collapsing and China trying to get back at the US, not Mexico.
Right, it's
Why is
about
this
China getting back at the US by cooperating with Mexico instead of them cooperating with us.
It's
Our
about-
evidence is that has already happened because the US is not.
No, it's about expanding their spheres of influence into Latin America. Why is supplying medical supplies to Mexico during COVID the same as that?
Why is water the same as military exercises? Like, this no spillover
How is that
argument hurts you
responsible?
more than it hurts us.
Wait,
And it does make a claim about broader relations.
yeah, it says that the US and the United States and Mexico should expand their security and law enforcement coordination. Why is this not an endorsement of increased US-Mexico cooperation?
It's an argument that your impact is not unique. It's definitely thumped because China helped Mexico during
Wait,
COVID.
Okay,
Second is that this no spillover argument that you're trying to make definitely zeroes the dissent.
okay, how is it saying that the impact is not unique when it's saying that right now is the moment we should increase cooperation with Mexico?
Because it says that China is already besties with Mexico. So they already have an SOI here, hasn't escalated.
Okay,
Your impact
I'm
is
really
not
unsure how that's the
Or
same as providing
empirical.
medical supplies, but sure. Let's talk about case. I'm just kind of confused about how like interstate water transfers are modeled globally.
Sure. So the 1AC herd evidence says that it provides a blueprint for a national water market. The Angle evidence says yes, has quote unrivaled prestige. So it creates a possibility of transboundary allocation, i.e. distribution between two states, which is how we solve rivers.
And then you talk about interstate versus intrastate. Are you in like U.S. Civil War here?
What?
No.
614, I'm 7. 7. 7. I wrote down 614. Yep. Everybody good for an order? Okay. T. Agriculture disad. Bubbles disad. Advantage counterplan. Advantage 1, 2.
We said T, ag, bubble, advantage counterplan, advantage 1, advantage 2.
Yep.
Alright.
Everybody good? Okay. Everyone else? Great. Top must be regulation. Two reasons to vote negative. One is limitations with the top tons of tiny athletes, incentives, capturing system, or infinite other mechanisms can build certain behavior that necessarily makes it burden because there's no bright line between what increases protection, what encourages protection under their intro. Two, it's ground. They steal all core ground. We lose access to this like this content. You can turn off and ones like privatization, instead of the guidance, which are the only functional limits. They say we need regulation. Well, first is the twofold intro. They must not only be regulation, but also prevent that regulation must not allow any harm. The fact that people could still pollute, they just have to trade for it, is still an independent violation, not something they go on. But they're not a regulation. They're a market, and that's the OECD evidence. They did the free cunning at the bottom, and I'll answer it. Here, the evidence says prices, but that means prices by the government, i.e. fines. That's not what they do. It's the government must impose prices, and they just allow people to create their own prices, which is not a government regulation. Now they do the counter-interpretation as zero intent to define, just has one example of protection, which any app could find as a card that has their app and the same sentence of protection, which proves that this kind of counter-interpretation explodes how you implement tiny affirmative. Now the other, the Nakayama evidence, no, this explodes limits, and also don't tend to define no position there, which means that they links all our friends. Now they say over-limiting, first though, protection of water resources in regulation, court definitions, Supreme Court of Orange County 12. Protection of water resources provides the power to regulate water resources, protection means control to provision to regulation, where House 13. Protection of in the regulated environmental protection control is less increase. They say over-eliminate. We include apps like MPAs, capping the regulated water solution, regulating runoff invasive species, and regulating contamination, but exclude apps that conserve or rehabilitate like water reuse, purification, or management, and apps that are tangentially related, like with RFS or regulation. They say only res wording. I just read the court from Orange card, which is exactly red. They say FXT. They link to this too. There's no reason we do when regulations. They say distinct mechanisms are very clear. Something is or is not a regulation. They say that counter on their app. No, there's a very big limit differential between ours, but any of that which outweighs any difference in precision. Either way, we're winning the precision debate, which means that it's inherently not physical. They say functional limits. There's states, so things like courts, their military apps, etc. They can just find an area that has only federal authority, which means it didn't really lose. They didn't say other. I didn't float any other functional limits, but no other words in the resolution text. They say or. This does not prove anything because it says shield or more regulate, but they don't do either way. The reasonability is bad. One forces the negative for every other means some reasonable permutation. The reasonable permutation of the topic slows limit to make that helpful. Two, it increases judgment generation, takes way out of the hands of readers. Three, we can't just gold plus we have lower quality evidence, makes it easy to meet, but no impact is T, some spin dimension classical debate. Four, they're unvisible if we are largely to our offense. Industrial ag is sustainable, turns the app, yields and efficiency are rapidly declining because of eroding soil, transition to small farm soils now, but increased expansion causes long distance of the culminate extinction. That's on the two frame issues. One is they've answered the wrong disset, the no link stuff is just links for us because solving farming at large is exactly what we think is bad, but also they consider turns case and impacts. One, they consider turns case because it means food collapses as the line of plans is inevitable. It was clearly flagging the tag, they did not get new answers, and they consider turns case because warming is inevitable because they big ag use HGG. They also consider multiple extinction impacts like pollinators, which is the common evidence, and soil erosion. Nobody answers any of the LV, a terminal of soil erosion just to be safe, but they don't get a new answer because it was flagged. Extinction, lose 17. Soil erosion ag is one of the most active human activities. Soil environment is essential to the kind of things you human continental soil erosion ag areas lose the nutrients that are regaining but unfavorable supplementation also affects the local quality of the water bodies and aquatic use and nutrition. The reduce of the final growth, the need to reduce the overall production level fair, the dignity for lives and exportation to level research of the resulting national economic political health and soil, nutrient loss of animal waste reversion to meet from environmental economic digital cycles to regeneration, directly affects the probably future generation. I'm not gonna read the next card. Now the link debate. First, they said the app stalls, they need water for crops. This is the wrong disset. That's a link. The fact that they give water to farms that would fail now is bad and will solve. Now the only actual we need or only link that actually answers this is the Booker app that the lead is sustainable. But our evidence says they're wrong. What our evidence says would be co-opted by big ag. Maybe in a vacuum that'd be a good thing. But our evidence says the market gets rigged, and that's proven by empirics like the industrial market. Here's more cards. Water schemes. The water markets receive no maximum probability for intensive farms. Kapahana L21. Water markets going to use individual not benefits to regional loss of farmers. They didn't maximize the farmer. Consider the cost on the water reallocation from low value users to high value users. The more the one the water so the lower the practice median, less than 10 the farm, less than 10 of the farms. So water intensive farms probably increases in the farms of water. The practice reducing the probability increasing to the farm increasing the probability less than 10 the farm.
losses, manipulation by external investors, ruin small farmers, Ben, and 21. Water trades get to the public interest, manipulation, access, speculation of real negative impacts on the cost participating on the target. Because for what is making leave without time, small farmers, but their evidence does not go far enough. It might make them a little more efficient, but our evidence says full on transition now is key, and they prevent that from happening now. They say aglo now, unique force, they've spotted this transition link, they're going to class, and it's going to double the time now, and the sustainability now. They say no link, it's about uncertainty. Again, wrong link. Uncertainty for big ag is probably a good thing, but finally, I think it's modernization solved. No, it's unsustainable. Conventional farming requires massive chemical impacts of destroy ecosystems, risking extinction. 17. It's enough the developers in just 5 years industrial ag to develop between the high soil levels and the chemicals accelerate enormous amounts of dominant advantage of agriculture, the ecosystem, and the bounty loss of extinction processes, political people, and loss of beats in their whole nation, chemicals, and life, land, and health, and food chain, humans, besides upworking, resulting in massive effects from sustainable advantages to the frame depending on the artificial intelligence of the entire ecosystem, environment, equipment, and come back as well, chemicals reduced, so the level of collection farmers will go work it whether they like it or not. We found 100% financial question. People oil, again, people oil, coal, and gas, there won't be enough to continue farmers will be forcing users to transition now. They are only war is innovation. It fails, and the movie awesome team. Economies and scale build towards innovation, concentrated markets often look against innovation markets, proceeded towards consolidating cost, not increasing innovation, make it to the large range of assets, the result of consolidation, companies, diminished innovation, that makes it failed to materialize, remains zero than their range of technologies, creating focus innovation on their range of technologies, creating paths and attract, from each majority depends on numbers and new breakthrough, global innovation, resolution, more liquid, good seal, and develop ultra solution for greater R&D, experiential, one, two, patent, exploration, concentration, light up, largest entries, more innovative actors, their internals are locked in, innovation can't solve, I'm at 20, duplication for future consequences, locked in the yield, decline, delta, 100% of participants, later structure effect on US Act, despite balance tech, business of the decimal scenarios now unavoidable. Bubbles. Oh, which I say? I don't know which I said. I'm gonna do condo here. I don't know if I said bubbles here. Condo, we get what we did. One is the words, which one neglect to the from multiple angles. Here's real world policymakers until multiple strategies and solver signing 3. As these sales makes it better using different methods. Average presuming 4. It's not biased. There's tons of applet and no neglect on the top of the neg. These are little rounding at 5. One condition we just look at the opposite idea. 6 is outsourcing by solves and know the weeks of the act and overadapt debate is no king the better content, especially because they have lots of each 7. Those arbitrariness. They're infinite time theory might debate a little better that kills. Fairness, they say bad ones, you know it's inevitable, but they make it worse because we read cross content. We look at things they're forced to permute. They did not define just one way that makes sense. Nobody knows what it means. We just add lots of person reader being 3. There's still incentives to straight turn. If they do straight turn, they force to take us with worse counterplans and they know weeks is above. Now the bubbles to that. Colt's going to take the rest of it, but I'm doing 2 and C counterplan tax. The United States federal government should ban federal water markets. 2 and C counterplans are good. 1 is that we is in the 2 and C cross extracted and still constructed. 2 is that they solve the best strategy. Otherwise, they have sandbag their best offense for the 2 and C. Only we can solve that 3. This is necessary, but not sufficient for deck flags. Otherwise, makes it possible that any mistake the 1 C means the mag is due before. It's hard to be. It's good to be, and they make sure using the other way. If they win, fat protect the argument on C. They say we can see the head decline, but they can see the fat-wise impact reach. External impact because it says there's no terminal impact either way. We control the internal because of the other descent now. They say more water now. They say they solve moving to water because states already do it. No, the evidence says that they're unable to. And answer says, quote, since it's very expensive, and even if it is technically possible, the fact that it would cost so much because people who use the market food insecurity does not escalate. The cliff evidence says you're not able to fight. The states about allies and adversaries that does not answer reassurance. How are people going to fight if they don't have enough food access? And why would people lash out just because they don't trust the U.S. because the lack of food insecurity does not escape? That's the LA Those telling me that the production access to food increases the probability of big people in the biggest survey on the position of short. The long-term long lines moving security could come on the common the rest of future conflict. No college the evidence faulty. Post y'all 1500 conflict deeper problems with references of the college and the later on needs prescription to feel the practice of the link. Nothing on the video rights called lots of formula had all of the common one of those causes was about intro, one was about inter. I don't know which they think they are, but they don't solve other. There's no warming term link. They say cross-X, but cross-X was not good for them. They've not explained the worst causal link, and that's the gate. It was not close to worst causal, but it's not accidental either way. Their carbons and even 10 degrees would not cause warming. They assumed tipping points was the only answer. Models are bad in fact consensus Piper in 19. Legends of extreme zero warming, simple as modeling average person the method of balance should be about even 10 degrees would not cause a really cosmic analysis of conscience, the death of Wellington people and extinctions, interchangeable conscience survival won't kill us all. The semiconductor stuff. This is not unique. It's for them. The recutting it very clearly goes negative. It says nothing. It just says that we have a strong semiconductor industry now, because we don't need it, but their term link is very bad. I did this above because it's about China as well. This was cross-X. He could not name a line of cross-X. It's about 30 questions where Lucas just refused to, which proves the evidence bad. Now, advantage 2, there's no terminal impact 1, there's no water shortage. This evidence says tech solves in the status quo, which means that it's not just question mismatch. Either way, the studies group of cycle de-escalate in Neutron War, Fisher 14. Another China any will be survived common and show the variable flexibility by disputes according to the times use carbon needs of mental China sublet 70 in the 70 there are only 3 species usually between less than 50% China and how with the current variables on which one should call the face of the person who could have all the latest isn't lead to comment. It assumes the river war, which is their only unique answer, and tons of text to impact war, 1 international actors, but they 19. Special to given to new vaccines, solution that we live in a solution cross check unusual non-present that's the last thing new terms valid 2 second ability con 17. Recent developments by new vaccines support in terms whether the 11 6 to deter the changes to the 11 3s or shaking 19 nuclear weapons are cause of nuclear history to sound is no real nuclear escalation vaccine not professional money down to the percent of the for any military nuclear weapons fundamentally change war. Wars have to fundamentally change war or control out the nature of war.
The right answer Just.
36, math is hard.
I have 745.
I can't do that. Are you good for cost?
Yeah, but can I just write 10, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, I wanted to start on topicalities, and the app isn't topical because it still allows for harm to water. It's the only app and that's topical one that bans contamination of water.
No, the reason it's not topical is the market itself is not a mechanism of preventing harm to water. Within the market, somebody could still pollute water as long as they buy that water from someone else first, or they don't even need to buy it. If they have water, they can pollute that water. So we're saying the mechanism itself must prevent harm.
Okay, let me give you the only definition of regulation, and you have read, says imposition of rules by government backed by the use of penalties that are intended specifically to modify the behavior of the private sector. The act uses regulations to influence the behavior of the private sector, stops water hoarding. How is that not regulation?
Because that's not what the act does. It says, so there's no scenario where somebody pollutes, like in the world of the act, there's no scenario where somebody pollutes water, the government says, you are not allowed to do that, either we're going to fine you or prosecute you. That scenario does not exist in your world, which means you do not need our interest.
Sure, interbond.
We get what we did, so 2.
So it includes the two.
It's just 2 condo, and then they have to be in constructors, but
Is the chance five on condo?
yeah, that was our
Okay.
second. If I miscounted, which I'm 99% sure, but it should be 2, but if I miscounted.
Okay, the ag is said, you said that industrial ag is bad. Which card do you think says that small farms are better for the environment?
The Ahmed evidence,
The almond evidence?
1 and C.
Okay. How does the ag trade off with small farms, given that it uses antitrust to break up big ag
The AF uses antitrust to break up big ag.
from hoarding water?
What?
Like the one you see the beer evidence. says-
Wait, what does the AF do to break up big
It was
ag?
the answer to the case argument you made, and the 1 C was the last card you had on the second advantage.
Okay, well, if this is the case, then I'm gonna add that to the T violation because antitrust to break up big ag, obviously not topical.
Well, those are penalties
No,
against
it's
the private
penalties
sector.
against the private sector.
Which
Oh, right.
For hoarding water.
The issue is that those penalties break up companies and don't protect water. But
Well, or doesn't it functionally result in the breaking up of big ag? The one I see the bear evidence
The
is
F-
that a cap and trade that breaks up water monopolies.
Wait.
Seems like that's what it is.
so the EV extended on the dissent in the 2EC was the Booker evidence. This Booker evidence makes a claim that there might be an increase, like a marginal increase in water efficiency, but does not make a claim it would lead to a transition. If this card in the 1IC is there's a
The
trans,
first part in the one I see that we read for the first 3 minutes.
the DeBear.
Yeah.
If that's the card.
Yeah, is there a question?
So is there a link?
Yeah,
If the
I've read
app
3
does
cards.
Regulations against hoarding.
Well,
Seems like the cards are about the square, and the app fixes.
oh, no, they're not. All the cards are about water markets.
Yeah, water markets that exist now.
No, it's about establishing new water markets. I mean, one might be in the context of Australia, but then it's and that's why we shouldn't do new water markets.
Okay, last one. Does the Canada ban state markets? No, right?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I intended to unless I wrote the text wrong.
Is this?
In that case, you can go for a
I
deficit.
mean, you can't amend it.
Yeah, I agree, I can't amend.
I'm sending it out. The order is gonna be,
Bubbles in New Mexico.
Wait, I'm gonna get a card for tweakers and see if it don't So, they started. Because it's kind of. Yeah, I know.
Oh, you stop.
H1.
Wait, 7.
You said 27.
Wait, 7, you said 6, right?
I have time 16 seconds.
Oh, okay, I thought you said 6:30. I was gonna say you
Oh,
took
no,
an
I
extra
was
minute.
just saying.
Yeah.
If people got me talking.
Yeah, I got a call.
Peninsula, are y'all ready?
Oh, 1 second.
Just let me know.
I need the order again.
Bubbles in Mexico. Look good.
No.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Peninsula. Sick.
Concede Congress only takes out any offense in case they try to classify water markets and to this, and I'll answer it here. The Wilkinson Card 2 Index 1. Wilkinson has no quals and just B and a BA in philosophy. The line that says their amount of water markets will happen is just the underlined part. It says or prediction. Obviously not qualified enough to make prediction. Or also it gives two warrants for increasing water markets. One is Australia models. Australia's water market is trash. That was cross-sex. And in the 1 and C, and it says the water scarcity is increasing now. Per the 1 AC, it's happening now. Means the water market should have been established. And they have it. The Mexico is sad. Strong U.S.-Mexico relations are crucial to preventing explosive great power competition. China and Russia would leave at the opportunity to undercover run window dropped in if relations escalated beyond China to make rupture sets the stage for short-term misguided mission that goes nuclear Chinese incursions on the most of the battle global nuclear war during the summer 20 China causing problems to undermine hedge to the Americans China's goal will establish hedge in the area while one of the Western industries very China U.S. and America's economic the same Chinese politics China interfere with management with the U.S. Mexico is one Argentina competition company more close U.S. interference around the globe escalates next 14 allows us to reach levels this will force Americans to do anti-military power changes in this compound while now the Fed has global out like Iran strike the U.S. pulling out among no number of governors and proxy war Mexico will be able to allow the U.S. military government collapse cooperation demand and the relationship along that line sort of line to the fact that the UAC with two cars that are really responsive to the disaster for our credit is at 1 2AC1 the DA scenario is not a question still about but a question of how U.S. market water management works. Mexico would hate the ass which water market a lot of markets which certainly linked to the disaster and they don't have a heart for this 2AC2 waters give U.S. Mexico relations financial agreement fosters hydro diplomacy water at the 19 working together and improve our relations hydro diplomacy and on can be able to decide diplomacy diplomacy we're doing and incorporated cooperation water resources and not to have an outreach cooperation with Mexico representative from 10 states Mexico's dealing with water other than resulting water resulting regional conflicts neighbors take of irrigation trade IWC have improved the hydro diplomatic successes in the treaties that are from all the transfer apparatus has obstacles no line of successful hydrological financial results into the future shifting geopolitical relationship financial relations with natural factors much development new relations after 1 years implication beyond of temporary relation are we can stress the lack of groundwater skip that card and water management underpins the several other geopolitical issues, including the border crisis, like 29 migratory climate, borders facing challenges, none. One thing to say with all these problems, they face bringing water and China desert community and doesn't do it. Talking water is one trend of geopolitical issues. Water is only desert water. The region is once in a lifetime opportunity. 2 SC3 and 8 U.S. relations with Mexico are high now. Here, Western Hemisphere affairs. 916 U.S. relations with Mexico are strong. Those growth relations beyond diplomatic relations and commercial, cultural, and secondary, and traditional ties, second largest trading partner. U.S. and Mexico, 1% billion U.S. citizens in Mexico, top one destination, the IWC insured Bureau of Veteran Atmosphere, under 916, the IWC, Water Resource and Boundary Issues Dispute, treaty stipulated rules in the water mitigation water was water IWC, it gave legal the partners to structure those coordinates and the gavel evidence. They conceded that the U.S. Mexico relations trade off the China Mexico relations. If we win that, we're over now that China isn't their gavel evidence is trash. A only warrant for Mexico, China cooperation is COVID live. B red card that water is way more important. B and F card says that is because China's increasing part of Latin America, it's required to increase U.S. cooperation with Mexico. I read, cut their card group this, but they highlighted the line 2AC4 the DA isn't about the U.S. Mexico cooperation being heated under China. 2AC5 the about plan 2AC6 not about line to the plan of how U.S. water management systems. 2AC7 yes, like Mexican farmers hate water management even if they win that they're regularly good and that export U.S. Mexico water management as well the overall relationship. U.S. Mexico water facing towns there's one because all problems of water problems bring up and what does return. Doesn't try to give it actually I read this above and yeah that counts as a lane. The 2AC now strong U.S. Mexico relationship to stop China's aggression go 20 Chinatown the U.S. That card. Latin American good card competition goes. Nuclear Lindsay and Cup 14. Latin American good cards get the political weakness just running U.S. security and political audience for major problems trying to rise while hiding competition. Beijing, Moscow, Latin America, lead to direct competitions with the nuclear powers have motivated means. U.S. Mexico relations keep to address world warfare and for one. Other ones use the flexibility to do well with climate. I need to work on bilateral solutions. Easy to be addressed by accepting the shared responsibility and working together, trying to cooperation deal. One with crime, the impact methods take collapse member 19. Metro Rapids was becoming a failed state. The government is a civil war involved in the state as state of corruption, occurs multiple measures McDonald to judge your region power was and agreement number 5 to the U.S. market card after the U.S. and the power war. Jones Roy 17. What happened to that's Mexican having posed security threats. On field discontent and hiding confidence of the now make good medical influence of the years. Entirely rated by the short trade regarding attention or education.
Yeah, 7:30. Yeah. Okay, so
6-5.
I believe so. I saw it 6 yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Order is case in order what I see, so shortages in modeling. The like bubbles is at. Then it's the actually sorry T before the each bubble is sad. So shortages modeling T. Then the econ is sad, the ag is sad, and then the like Mexico is sad. So case T, the bubbles ag Mexico. Okay. Good.
Yep.
Yes, hegemonic causes extinction. The brand's evidence says it causes alien proliferation and causes terrorism, which all has faced aggressive great power wars. The right evidence says it causes SY collapse, which causes extinction. With Russia and China agrees to war for the first, they say that the first the food insecurity. Yes, it causes escalation, it causes conflict. Their evidence just says it doesn't. The evidence, the best evidence, and the post evidence are just don't assume things like migration and escalating internal instability, which it forces leaders' hands. That's why they lash out. It's not that they are just like we're hungry and we're starving, so we can't fight. That's not that analysis doesn't really apply here because it's about those sort of tensions that force their hands, which is a piece of Richard's evidence from the YC, and it does cite the statistical analysis to the largest data set possible, which means it's better than the recipe evidence. Warming stuff you can't reversely causally solve warming truth, but it's about mitigating the worst effects and preventing positive feedback. But they conceded the internal link, which is literally mass adoption of CCS in the agriculture sector, which should be sufficient, and it's the way we adapt to it. But they conceded the impact with the spread Dillop's evidence that says cause extinction. The intro about semiconductors, yes, we could point you to a line that's in the United States in the small font, but that doesn't matter because the Yang evidence that they have read says that it is a linchpin of U.S. hegemony, which means that they have spotted as the internal link, the modeling page. Water shortages cause extinction through cyber attacks and terrorism across the globe. They conceded that the plan gets modeled, but which means we're solving water shortages that escalate globally. The first defense, yes, there is escalation. Their evidence does not assume water diversion of the Indus River Valley, which forces hands. Yes, specifically there is an Indo-Pak conflict. Their evidence does not assume that the Pakistani commanders are the ones that have the tactical nuclear low-yield weapons, which means that they will use it, and their evidence just says that India has an NFU, but our scenario would be Pakistan striking first. But again, none of their evidence assumes diversion. The T page. We meet the Office of Regulation. The OECD highlighting says prices. We impose those as per the 1C variance. It also is only a regulation, which says they don't have a clear violation, but you can extend the second counter rotation, which is Nakayama. It's our excludes restrictions on pollution to water allocation limit to 3 general areas. And a LC 15 water law can be divided to areas rights to use water, restriction on pollution, water allocation rights, and water plotting. US 3 different allocations to the pedal range of auction, recreation hybrid system, water pollution laws extraordinary complex or caseless is equitable apportionment, water rights public trust auction, water markets and hybrids, which solves limits better. We're internally training their limits argument. It creates a more limited version. The 2C cases presents infinite. If it's just like MKs, you can just cease pollution and regulate any specific body of water. But ours has to be changing the whole of allocation, which answers their sort of push and also ground. The only topic after out changing allocation, which creates a better sort of negative vision of ground because they get counterpoints about better appropriation doctrines. It just adds to that specific allocation mechanism, but they make it impossible to yap because every after lose with the regulation pig in the base con disadd, which makes it possible the reasonably after my predictability, but reasonable is a tiebreaker judge intervention. It's inevitable. You should only put egg to make it base possible. Reasonably incentivize T over substance, which causes substance crowded T is not substance. The econ disadd. Unregulated markets are inevitable. Their only answer is if Indike, but he's qualified as an institutional portfolio manager at Franklin and Templeton with 20 years of experience and cites that increasing number of states and countries adopting water markets proves it's inevitable, which sums are dissads. The ag page. Permanently both printed the counterplan, but it doesn't get them anything. The ag dissadd. It doesn't solve state markets. The ag dissadd. This set is wrong. You can cross-apply the case answer to hoarding, which is dropped in a block. The one you see the bear says we create a cap and trade and limit big purchases by big ag, and it says that there's a guaranteed X gallons, like 1,000 gallons would be free for the small farms, which means that there wouldn't be collapsing. So there's literally zero link to this. And meta-analysis previous straight turn. Actually, I'll read the card one time, but they haven't grappled with the literally zero risk they just had no link and the impacts on control. The vector is that. There's a lot of problems with this. At first, it's all cause. The water is definitely not key. It's just an opinion article. Want to see Nature 21 COVID-19 pandemic struck my bird about the need for restore U.S. Mexican border health commission for nutrition, diabetes, infectious diseases, other countries, and the impacts of uncertainty. The one and see Mearsheimer, 20 Canada, Brazil, Argentina, the insurgents, plus the U.S. and Chinese circuit cooperation with decades of worse answers the new impact emphasized red, which is just the same as the 1 and C1. The intervention stuff. We won't intervene in Mexico over water that's silly. We won't send our military. And there's other countries definitely thumped. Their tooling card is not specific to Mexico. And LS 16, which also answers the new impact while they read and potentially conduct military operation Latin America, Caribbean to attack USA police sustainable. Those with the US Homeland Diversity Force, diversion water from other theories. And thanks for the no link card. It's Brazilian and unrelated 1C. 1 in our Wilder 19. The United States and Mexico have tended property management, transfer to water to 6 clash immigration, narco trafficking, trade, and other geopolitical significance. All cause Brazilian Bureau of Western Hemisphere 916. We read yellow goes. The ultimate official relation it comes to 6 and commercial, cultural, educational ties to the top to 4 destination for US translators. They dropped the dissent starts in 2023. This is too late. All impacts happen before their F says they say our card flows after. That's wrong. The F says we should do things to increase relations because they're already at an all-time low, which proves that their dissent should have already happened. The ag, yeah.
614.
I have 1 of 6 left.
Oh, yeah, this is really long.
I get it.
Everybody turn on. Ag to sad. Mexico to sad. Bubbles to sad. Advantage 1 advantage 2. Everybody good?
You know you're in a bad spot when the trigger has to go for a cross-sex moment that's not supported by the evidence they've conceded in Curry's case and an external impact. The new evidence goes conceded in soil erosion. No part of the YC makes any claim but soil erosion. So Lucas claiming there's no external does not matter. If they mean they acted agricultural damage that down the flow, they conceded multiple turns case warrants 1. It turns food against collapse inevitable. That means that there's no way for weapon 1, 2 is warming. They conceded how big emissions, a big ag uses the most emissions, it's just more warming, etc. would overwhelm any somehow carbon capture that they claim to solve 3. It's head their series about allies being uncertain because they don't have access to food, which is obviously covered that in 4 as it turns warm because it's unconscious and more likely to be unstable for all of their few scenarios. Now they conceded that class is untenable, which means it's try or die negative. Unsustainability faces every debate. It means there's no reason to risk them. This like questionable, maybe this evidence set in their link then when you know that we solve their impacts and when you know that there's going to be collapse in the status quo. If you consider the link and turns case means there's no reason to risk it. Now I'm going to do the spirit antitrust stuff. I have 6 subpoints. 1 is control F trust or antitrust. That card never said anything about antitrust or doing antitrust or regulating agriculture, etc. 2 is it's not a solvency advocate. Maybe a card says that. The 1 card also says the China war or the hedge is bad. That does not mean they solve hegemony or that does not mean they fiat solving hegemony. So the fact that 1 card might mention agriculture or trust, even though it does mention either, does not mean anything. 3 is that means you have to prefer the planted. There's no other way for us to know the fact that they can explain any part of the app or any card as something new in the 2 and 2 cross X after I've given the block and after they say the block strategy obviously makes it impossible to negative means they will always say like the cross offense, so always wait until the 1 ER and then re-explain the app makes it impossible to be affirmative. 4 is that there no highlighted line says agriculture. If you control F it, I think it says it twice, but both are underlined and unhighlighted, which means this card, the De Beer evidence, the first in the 1C, which is what they were supposed to about, never says agriculture. 5 is new in the 1 ER, even if it wasn't in context, it was not in the 2EC. They extended a different card, which is Booker, which I'll answer in a minute just to be safe, but they cannot do a new one. Obviously, they re-explain it. But 6 is if you cannot vote on it, if you cannot explain it right now, you cannot explain how they solve, you cannot vote on it. Even if the 2AR sounds great, I cannot have preempted that. So I have no idea how they think they solve agriculture. If you also right now have no idea, you can't vote on something you have no idea about. Now the link to me, I'll do just in case you overwhelmed. First, I'll answer the Booker case to try to re-extend it or say this was hard. No, the Booker evidence says they may be made marginally more efficient. That's massively overwhelmed by the 3 specific link cards I read. First is the Barlow evidence gives them here. So the Australian market says that prices skyrocketed and small farmers were unable to buy water, while big ag, which had tons of money in the bank, was able to buy and monopolize the war. That means they push out. Second, the Combinova evidence. It says that less intensive are immediately sell to higher intensive agriculture. People who use more water buy right away, and people who have less sell right away. It makes logical sense. But then the people who have less are unable to meet the high profits that the big ag is reaping in because they're using so much water and lets them cut prices and push out the smaller. Third is that it's rigged and manipulated. That's abandonment to evidence in 21. It's not about total markets, it's about future markets and proposed markets. Instead, those would be rigged, that small farms would be uniquely pushed out, and that people are able to speculate, rig the market, etc. In Turns case, I did above. They cannot go for any other part of this. All they did was write about a card that's not right. They said no class. They conceded there is going to be a class. I don't know if this was a no link, but they conceded something up like did about the innovation warrant. In case you try to extend, I'll answer here. They conceded there's no incentive to innovate, and small farms solve better because monopolies have no incentive to innovate. They all the R&D money goes to renewing old patents, not doing new ones, and they push out new, more marginal, and more innovative firms that would be coming in. They said impacts on extendo. They can see the new evidence, soil erosion, very much external, no part of the YC exit. If they think they solve, they don't. Nice guy. Conceded to late. Markets.
2 years too late to cross-apply this Williston card bill. They just did not answer the kind of one enough. Perm to both is obviously it's not possible to establish a water market. So it's like mutually exclusive. It's not possible to ban water markets and establish water market. Perm to the kind of plan does the opposite of that. That's sovereign voting issue. They say they don't. We don't solve states. There's no reason we have to solve states because their evidence is a federal market is coming now. There are states in the status quo. That's the whole thing. And the fact that those have not solved their impacts prove they also don't solve our kick. That's the 2 hours not getting new answers. This was about 3 less small, very big arguments in the 2 hour. Either way, you can judge if you don't like it, and whether they don't get the new force application because it was not applied to that specific data in the 1 AR. The hedge stuff is new. They consider the 2EC because they did not flow my impact even to it, but I'll answer either way. They consider the fact way 7 says you overestimate other factors or what contribute along piece and that things. I'll concede that we will never intervene from the Mexico data, which proves that even if hedge is good, we utilize that hegemony, which answers any scenario they may have, but there's no scenario who works out against Russian stuff. They consider the long piece is not because of that. Now they say yes, like for food wars. No, one, they would not be able to fight even if they wanted to fight. The people are literally starving, so not able to. They say it's about showing up confidence. Obviously, if you're food insecure, if your country's food insecure, you're not going to be like, oh, instead of let the combating food insecurity, let me go a nuke somebody. That's the Cliff evidence and the best evidence. We've answered both inter and intra-state, which is their only thing. They say their evidence cite data, so does the Cliff evidence also use empirics. Now, warming, they said we dropped extinction, but considered a new card, the Piper evidence and curves. It's even 10 degrees do not cause extinction. There's no such thing, points, but no evidence says CCS. They say carbon storage, they say carbon storage, I think, once in the carbon. It never says enough to mitigate, and this was all across X. Now they consider that semiconductors are fine now, that that's internally to hedge it above. Now, eventually. No Indochina or Indo-Pak war. One is they consider all. They say attack nukes first to answer no issues, but they dropped other warrants. One, international actors that Sputnik people are trying to moderate the conflict. People make sure that doesn't. Second is that second strike con means even Pakistan would not strike first because they know India could second strike in the back. Third is that the strike gangly does not just say no issues. It says both no. I mean, it's true. They also consider DPT from the Netherlands, which means they would not go to war against democracy. The Fisher evidence answers the water theory because it's about cooperation and says that when they have a transboundary issue, what they do is cooperate. It's most rational for everyone involved. That's also the one in Stockholm Robin evidence, which says they will never go to war. The 2 AR has to go for this weird, like so new explanation that makes no sense whatsoever. If it makes sense after the 2 AR, that does not matter, because right now they just asserted they're an antitrust act, which they obviously are not. Paradox, I presume.
Order is modeling, shortages, ag, all to the like 2MC pattern credits, market and next stuff. Yeah. Okay. Everyone good? In this chart, the advantage might not be great, but they have drawn that the plan solves global water shortage, which is the only advantage that acts as a trade to the dissent, which means that any mitigation on the dissent is an auto-FL. They have drawn the Simpson evidence at the top of the advantage that the global water shortage alone causes extinction, the exacerbated national tensions, cyber tax, terrorism, biodiversity loss, and ecosystem costs that are all imminent, all short-term, and all existential, which means that any semblance of a doubt in your mind about whether or not the dissent links means you have to vote affirmative. It's like scientific studies that says the top 5 risks. It also means that you'll be fighting in a world which causes soil erosion or whatever their impact is, because water shortages make that impact inevitable, and actually causes none of their impacts actually cause extinction, because I will be fighting over scarce resources which will destroy the environment completely. Now the shortage advantage defense, who cares? Doesn't matter. The Indochina idea defense also doesn't matter because they're not going for that impact. Now that is that the only question in this space, whether or not regulated water markets with cap and trade are superior to their impact about uncertain, unregulated state markets. Sorry, you misunderstood the trick of the app. It's the reason I cut the new Salty Advocate before this tournament. It's been clear since the one I see. If you actually read the new Salty Advocate, do not let the turner gaslight you because they're just factually wrong about the link to the dissent. Now the market stumble due here is excellent. The Wilkinson and DeBear evidence is qualified to be writing about it. Absent government regulation, corrupt markets will be established and reverse in all of their impacts because it's water hoarding and regulatory capture because there is no government intervention in the private sector, which means the monopolies can create artificial shortages about the types of water markets that they have read links to unregulated and informal markets that the YC DeBear evidence is comparative between. So the act solves the problems with those markets now because water hoarding occurs in the flow. The evidence they have read is just a critique of water markets broadly, and they have dropped the act solves those problems with it. Now, the problems with it, and you cannot look me in the eye after this debate and tell me that the plan causes it because those things happen now, which means the two empty counterflow doesn't solve because it doesn't solve state markets, which is the one called evidence that cause uncertainty, which causes water hoarding and absent of regulation and hoarding of water. They a big ag will create artificial shortages. Now, here's why there is zero risk of the disadvantage, and the app is definitely a straight turn that you can fill through every app speech. There is a yes/no issue because it's a question of whether or not the plan does what you said it does. If you allow big ag to ruin small farms or not, the one you see read a 3-minute long DeBear card at the top of the one you see that indicates a whole bunch of reasons why markets must spell scarcity, but it is mostly a guide for how exactly we need to combat monopolization of markets and why we need to create competitive markets for innovation, i.e. the small farms. The plan text says regulate, not create. Their evidence assumes we create markets, not unregulated markets where water simply flows on price and productivity. We agree that results in hoarding and monopolization. Those are linked to the status quo, which is why the 1AC plan says we regulate existing markets. Now the Tracy answered the hoarding case argument, which means that this is not a new 2-year argument. Had evidence by extending the 1AC to bear evidence. Booker was extended to agriculture internally, but our answer to hoarding was that the plan is anti-monopoly and uses cap and trade, and one of our cost supplies to the disadvantage. They simply stated that TWIO2 warrants that the two are dropped. 1, the plan would restrict certain transfers that are monopolized, like taking over smaller farms and ruining their profitability. Second is that the farm would grant everyone an amount of gallons of water for free. This solves if a farm is disrupting the profitability of ones in their industry. Transfers would be stopped by the government to prevent a monopoly, which is the one you see some. Yeah, I'll go. There's subpoints. The first one, control F, antitrust, or F says monopoly many times. So yes, you just didn't control F for that. It says that we use regulations against them to decrease water hoarding. It doesn't matter if you don't use antitrust. They don't have an antitrust warrant. We just use regulations to break a water hoarding. 2 is the plan that says regulate. Our we meet on T proves this argument that we impose penalties, which is clear throughout every process and every speech, which you drop solving the advocates are key, which was your interpretation on planning to acting. Now, control F for ag. This is the relevance about antitrust in every industry. The plan breaks up water hoarding. 4th is the Booker answer song, and we send it a bear evidence above. But it does say that we solve ag, which will be later. That is the link, but it would be impossible because the government would stop these transfers, stop big ag from just breaking up small farms. They say you don't sell agriculture. Yes, you do. Make it such a farmers with excess water. You can transfer. The last argument was like, you need to read me a line from the card. I'll read it here. Quote, monopoly calls for regulation to make sure that enough water is provided at reasonable prices. Price regulation counterbalance forces. Monopoly water utilities are inclined to use market power and charge too high a price. Price of water has to be higher than the marginal cost. Look, the app definitely straight terms it is. They did not read ourselves into the advocate. The app breaks up monopolies. It says that they not create artificial shortages, that they have to trade away the rest of the water because it sets a cap on the amount that they can hold. This is a clear simplicity context. The app is a cap and trade market, not an unregulated market. Also, drop the unregulated state market is inevitable, which zeroes the dissent. The only 2 in our answer was like, we didn't cross-apply this from 1 AR, but we did. You can trace the no link through every speech and every context. Do not let them gaslight you into thinking that we didn't make this argument. It's been consistent. The 1AC Solvey advocate says it. That's it.
Okay.